So look, maybe we can start rolling into the introductions. And last people will join probably in a few minutes and they will catch up.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, very good. So welcome everyone to this Threat Hunting Academy Discovery webinar today, Thursday morning. My name is Tapio Värämäki and I'm here with my two Belgian colleagues, Peter-Jan Platon and Luke Schörner. Good morning, guys.
Hey, guys.
And the thing that we're going to discuss more detailed about today and what these two gents will introduce to you, that's 2 days training that they call Threat Hunting Academy, and they have put it together by themselves. And Luke and PJ, they've been with us 10 years now. So they
10 and 11 actually. PJ is the old timer here.
yeah.
Senior.
And both guys are very much experienced in cyber security and all kind of tools and defenses and also the attacks we have seen over the past decade within the industry. And it's I went through the training you have put together. That was like I guess the last rehearsal before you went live.
Oh.
And that was a very nice training and lots of hands-on. And I guess my question to you is that it's probably been some hundreds of hours of man work to put all this together. What's driving you? What's wrong with you guys? Don't you have anything better to do in the weekends? Because I know that this has not been your day job.
We have no lives. No. So actually, this training came together historically from we did kind of initially I think it was hacking labs, things like that, where we just showed some things to an audience still in classroom, and then we kind of moved that along to threat hunting sessions basically, and then we did some of those in Finland and in Sweden and a bunch of other of the Scandinavian countries, and that was an afternoon where we basically would kind of talk about the whole idea behind discovering advanced, it's not always that advanced what we see, but advanced adversaries in your network or just opportunistic cybercrime that's happening. And a lot of feedback was that people found it really entertaining because we would show actually how we breach a complete network. But the feedback we always got was we would like to kind of also have hands-on. And because we couldn't fit that in an afternoon, we said, well, why don't we make it into a training? So I think that was over a year and a half ago. And then we spent about a year, evenings and weekends building this. So it's... It's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's that was the only conclusion I was able to say after training, that someone has spent a lot of time on this, and I really appreciated it. But the structure of today's session is that we are having this 55 minutes and you are walking through the training contents today.
Yep.
And a little bit what you are discussing within the training, what are the topics, and also a little bit about the use cases, I believe. I'm a SOC analyst. Could this be a good training for me? How do I benefit of this training? If I'm a pre-sales engineer or I'm working at a managed service provider at the vendor selection team, how could I benefit from this training?
Yeah, well, I'll mention a few of those things, like what's in it for whom, and so on. So, all right. So let's kick it off, right?
And in the end of the session, we take a list of attendees still online, and we are running a drawing after this session, which means that we randomly pick one of you and we'll reach out, and you're gonna be handed over a free seat to this next training. And if you cannot make that one, let's make the one after that.
Yep. So free trainings, who doesn't want that, right? So
yeah, exactly.
get your mind blown for free, right? Most people at the end of the second day are like, like I can't deal with it anymore. It's too much.
This was not a reward. It was a punishment. Okay, but stage is yours, please.
All right. So good morning, everybody. Finland, Baltics, right? So pretty crappy weather over here. Don't know what's over there. I guess you guys are used to pretty crappy weather, but anyhow, so let's just briefly introduce ourselves here. I didn't put you on here, Tapio. I figure everybody knows you over there, so you don't need to be introduced. Myself, I'm Luc Schoonhout. I'm Director of Technology at Exclusive. I'm responsible for the technical team, also for new emerging vendors that we go and scout and that we sign up and put in the market. Part of the breach investigation team at Exclusive Networks, and my expertise in the last years, I've been in cybersecurity like 25 years now. So before the word existed, I think. And the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've been mainly focusing on anything that's related to, digital forensics, incident response, threat hunting, EDR technologies, the user behavior analytics technologies, kind of trying to figure out, what they bring to the table besides, a lot of the marketing stuff. So that's me. I'm one of the authors of the training, and then we have PJ here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Luc. Peter Laton, working for Exclusive Networks now almost 12 years. So within the company, I've always been working with our products, perimeter security, endpoint security, and now the newer technologies, EDR, SIEMs, NDR, etc. So I've always been a trainer. I've always been doing pre-sales, and I love giving workshops. So that's what actually this training became. It was a huge workshop, which then we decided to go live with, and it became a great training. So
all right.
Yeah.
All right. So agenda. We're going to quickly go over like what is threat hunting, what does it entail, and also kind of level set a little bit. Like even if you're not going to actively do threat hunting, there's still a lot of value in here, because threat hunting is like the ultimate step of proactively going through your through the data that you have on your in your environment. But there's a lot of things that you actually can take out of this as well, even if you don't go and do stuff proactively with it. We'll give a little sneak peek on the training, what it looks like. This training is completely built in the cloud. And we are working with a wiki and with labs, so there's no PowerPoints or PDFs or anything like that. We figured it's just a lot nicer to kind of teach, and do a lab, and keep it very PowerPoint light. I'm going to also have a little stop on the current state of breaches and what we are seeing in the last few years, what we see happen. How that, for example, also ransomware attacks have evolved, and what the mindset is behind, a lot of the cybercrime. Talk a little bit about, the target audience. This is an entry-level training. This should be, if you have a technical background, this should be okay. You don't have to be an expert in anything here. The training is kind of foolproof. We made sure that everything is copy paste from within the wiki, so it's like you just need to focus on understanding. You don't need to know all the commands and things like that. We have Q&A, so at any point if there's questions, Tapio, and then if you have a question, just type it in the questions box, and you can interrupt us. We can always answer your question on the spot. And like mentioned, so we'll give one free seat away for the next training, and if you can't attend to the next training, which is the 20th and 21st, it's later on in the slides as well, of May, we will announce some future dates. We have 2 more private trainings in June, but we are probably going to add 2 or 3 more trainings later this year. Then you can join one of those. So this is not, if you're a vendor, sorry, we're really going to give this to our customers. And if you're an exclusive employee, you can come to the training, but we're not going to give you the free seat. That's for our partners and our customers. So just a very quick overview on what threat hunting is, right? So threat hunting has been hyped very, very heavily in the last few years. There's a lot of marketing stuff going on, and there is no threat hunting solution. Like there is no box that you install in your network and that's going to threat hunt for you, right? So threat hunting is still a very manual thing, that you're going to do, and it depends on data, right? No data, no hunting, and especially centralized data, because you need to collect stuff from different log sources all over the place in order to go and hunt. So what you do is that you collect the right data, you go and build a specific detection, and then you're going to test those detections. That is typically an end result of your hunting. Once a team has been hunting in the environment, that's where you start building those kind of detections that in the future you can like trigger very, very quickly on similar kind of events that the hunting team has found. Now, hunting itself is hypothesis based. It means that you're going to look for something that you haven't had an alert or anything like that. You're going to look for certain behaviors in the environment, get to know the environment. And what we talk about in the training also is like, where do you start with that, right? And what data do you need? We see the mistake being made very often that people just start collecting all kinds of data. Just send me all the firewall logs, send me all the endpoint logs, send me all the logs that you can find. That's not the approach that you want to take, right? And this is a part of the training, is kind of to understand like, what are you looking for, and make sure that you get the right data from the right sources. There's a bunch of different, like I kind of divided it in three places when you get data. It's like generic logs that can be from servers, can be from your firewalls, can be from your infrastructure. So that's the normal like logs that you can collect. There's network logs that you network traffic that you can collect, like with PCAP or NetFlow. We're not really focusing on that in the training. Again, it is useful, but for threat hunting, really to understand what's going on, you will need to have typically like those server logs and endpoint logs. Like without endpoint logs, you're not going to hunt much. You might find some things on network level, but you're never going to get the complete story. So this is quite an important part. We're focusing on the MITRE framework, so a MITRE attack that talks about TTP, so tactics, techniques, and procedures. So one of these things is like hunting is not saying like here's an indicator, here's an IOC, like here's a bad IP address or a bad hash and look for it. That's not hunting. Like hunting is looking for the adversary behavior in the environment. Do we know what kind of techniques are commonly used, and do we see these techniques being used in our environment? And the idea behind it is that you kind of get to understand what your environment is like, and again, your environment changes quite rapidly nowadays, with cloud adoption, with containers and so on. So, but it is important that you have a good understanding on, what do we expect to see in our environment, and what is kind of weird, right? And this is where like baselining comes in, and also something we kind of weave through the training is machine learning. This is another one, artificial intelligence, which, whatever the vendors are saying, we are definitely not at any artificial intelligence. So as I always like to say, AI is no match for human stupidity, but we are definitely not there yet. But machine learning does bring some things to the table here, especially when it comes to kind of baselining and suppressing noise. And this is something we kind of, when we are going through this data and we're building certain detections and based on techniques that we kind of go point out, like these kind of detections, you can really kind of bring them to the next level when you have some kind of machine learning. So in short, like threat hunting is a proactive task that you do. You start from a certain technique that you say, well, I might want to see if there's any kind of lateral movement happening in the environment, or I want to see if there's any beaconing going on, command and control traffic, whatever that is. And that's something that you do on a recurring basis. So it's not a one-time thing. It's maybe on a weekly basis that you have a team of people that go and look through the data that you have collected to focus on a certain technique. And again, there it is important, of course, like, you can pick whatever technique you want, but if you don't have that data, in your data lake, you're not going to hunt much. So this is like a circle where you say, like, what are we going to focus on, and where does that data need to come from? So there's some examples, as I said, like if DNS can be used for command and control. Well, do we see any command and control traffic over DNS in our environment? And there is the first question, right? Are you logging DNS traffic? If you are not logging DNS traffic, you can just completely forget about detecting that technique. Another one, and that's something that we have quite a few labs on, is lateral movement, specifically with PSExec. That is being used in different forms and variations by a lot of ransomware and a lot of adversaries. And we kind of go into the under the hood, how PSExec does what it does, and how you detect that, and how can you see that is kind of like normal or abnormal in your environment. And we're trying to answer the question like, this kind of technique, like let's say privilege escalation or curb roasting or whatever. Has anybody done this on my network, right? So do we see this kind of behavior without knowing what IP address it comes from or what tool is being used? We don't really care that much. That's not what we start from. We want to detect the higher level behaviors, and then we will filter down to the tools that they have used. But if you're going to focus on the tools, then whenever they change the tool, again, you can start over. So focusing on the technique is really important there. And like I mentioned, it's a repeatable process that you want to automate to a certain point, and that process is also going to give feedback to your SOC team, to your responders, and also to your operational team, right? Where the threat hunters go in and start investigating something, and they find something, and then they say, well, we don't have enough data in order to properly investigate. And then you might have to go back to your operational guys and say, like, can we get that data also in the data lake? So, which will then again improve your visibility. So we start from the assumed breach model, right? We're not focusing on how the attackers are getting in, whatever social engineering, phishing. We're just assuming like, they will get in. We see it all over the place. And the idea here is, what happens once they are in? What are the steps that they go through once they get a foothold within the environment? And then that's the question that most companies have to ask themselves, like, how would we deal with the fact that an attacker or an adversary is in the environment? Do we have any visibility beyond that firewall and beyond that antivirus? And if not, you're going to have a very, very bad day, right? So we don't really care much about zero-day attacks and so on. So you every now and then you see like, here's a zero-day attack, but most of the stuff that we see out there is either living off the land, where they just have the user execute code for them without using any exploits or anything, or it's exploits that have been out for years and years and years. Like we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of SSL VPN vulnerabilities out there that are not patched, and the attacker can just get access over your VPN, and they're at that point they're in, and it's what we want to focus on is like, what are the next steps that they're going to do, and hopefully then be able to detect that very early on, so that we don't have a breach, but we have a contained incident. And we kind of focus here on visibility. If you don't have any kind of visibility within your cloud or within your on-premise environment, well, you're not going to see what happened. You're not going to find anything, and you'll figure it out probably a few months later that they ran off with God knows what data, or when they encrypt stuff, you'll typically know that your servers have been encrypted, and then you get blackmailed into paying, and if you don't pay, they kind of start leaking data. But what we believe is that you have prevention technologies, and your firewalls, your antivirus, and your whole defense in depth, and that's attack surface reduction, right? You need that, but that's not going to be, that's not going to stop everything. And if you get it out of your head that you have to prevent everything from happening, because you cannot prevent everything. That's what we see all over the place. But if you can very quickly detect and accurately detect when these things are happening, and you have the capability to respond in a timely fashion, then you have prevention. Yes, maybe an endpoint got breached, or maybe they got into some part of the network, but if they were not able to establish what their goals are, all right, because the attacker needs to has a goal, like needs to get to some, typically to get some data or encrypt data, whatever that data is. If they don't get to that point, then they didn't win. There's this mindset that a lot of people have is, well, the attacker just has to find one weak spot, and we have to kind of cover everything. So this is not fair. Well, yes, but you're on your home turf. If the attacker finds a weak spot and they're in, then they have to start doing a whole bunch of things in order to reach their end goals. And then typically those things are like privilege escalation. They need to have credentials in order to move around in the environment, because sitting on one endpoint is not going to do much. So there's quite a bunch of opportunities where you actually can detect what's going on. And when that happens and you can early on detect that, then it's not the end of the world. You contain whatever that threat is, and you go and have a look, you do your investigation, see what happened, and then feedback to your operational guys and say like, they got in through a phishing or they got in through a vulnerability. Let's see if we can go and fix that and make sure that doesn't happen again. So main focus here on this on this screen you see is the post exploitation. It doesn't have to have an exploit, but like once they get in that part. And like I mentioned, we focus on MITRE, and I was just talking about it pre-show here. MITRE has been the last 3-4 years becoming more and more a standard when vendors and the industry talks about these attack techniques that an adversary can use within the environment. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of tactics. So these vertical rows are all kind of tactics that they can use, like initial access. Obviously, there's always going to be initial access. That can be in different forms. It can be phishing. It can be an exposed RDP server that's having weak passwords. It can be an exploit on VPN and so on. It can be USB drives that are dropped and infect the machine. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. And not all of these steps are going to be used every single time, right? And if you go down here, for example, in lateral movement, you'll see all these techniques. So you see here vertically the techniques that can be used, right? So you see here, for example, Windows admin shares or remote file copy, pass the hash. So these are all techniques that they can use. And then within those techniques, there is the procedure that actually explains what that technique entails, so how it works. And like this is one actually that we're also going to deal with in the training. It's like, how do adversaries move laterally over Windows admin shares? This is very common. Windows admin shares enabled by default on any Windows server or endpoint, and the only thing you need is credentials. So we start from the MITRE framework. It's a good starting point. It at least gives you some kind of idea on what do we find important. We don't want to go through every single technique, but in the training also we're going to go through the most common ones that we see being used heavily in the wild and explain how they work and so on. So I'll let PJ explain a little bit on what the 2 days look like and what the environment looks like and so on.
Okay, thank you, Luke. So yeah, what is the training about? So it's a 2 days training. We are delivering it, of course, and it's very little theories. There will be a kick of 2 hours of slides, not even that. And then we dive right into the hands-on part. Okay, so what are we going to do in the hands-on part? There's 2 important things. We have the infrastructure setup, and that is where, as Luke explained, it is really, really important before you go in do about threat hunting that we have data, okay? And then the real question is, where is that data coming from? In our case, most of the data in our pipeline is going to come from the endpoint itself. So how are we collecting that data? What logs are interesting? Because yeah, of course, we want to have everything, but where are you going to store it then? So then you have like performance issue, a cost issue on storage, etc. So we'll explain where can we get data, what data is important, and how do we get that data from the endpoints to our actual data lake and look at it. Okay, and if we look at that data, there are a few questions we can ask ourselves. Maybe we can enrich that information so we can make better detections, build better queries. So in all, the threat hunting experience is going to be better. So what you guys are going to get is, you're seeing that in this slide, every student is going to have their Windows machine. They're all going to be in the same domain. You will also have a Kali machine. We're going to be doing attacks on that as well. And that is where the data lake of our pipeline is going to be set up. Okay. Now, very interesting to notice is that the setup we are building is very similar as to the vendors are actually doing it. Okay? So we're not using any vendor technologies. Well, we are, but not vendors that we have in our product portfolio. We're building an Alex stack. We're using message queues. And in real life, we see that all of these vendors back in their data centers under the hood are using very, very similar. And that is important for people like you, like us, to understand, okay, if we have a data lake with a lot of information, we're doing threat hunting, if we're not finding something, it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened on these devices. Maybe we are not logging it properly. Okay? And that is the real question we're going to be asking ourselves over and over again. I don't know, look, are you going to go to the wiki, or do I?
Yeah, so I'll share the wiki here. This is a screenshot, but let me just share the actual wiki. Okay, is that?
Yeah, that's perfect. So the wiki is going. So we do not have slides on our laptop. We have a wiki, and we're going to be going through the wiki, explaining that infrastructure, building the whole pipeline, and you can see some interesting technologies here. We'll be talking about Docker, Partainer, how is the EDR component working, an Alex stack, how do you set that up with these technologies we've just discussed. And then at the end, you can see of day one, we have everything set up to start doing proper alerting. We will have dashboards, a GUI, and all of that. So this is, Luke was showing us really interesting.
I'm just going to go through some of this stuff. So what's also interesting here is like we're building this pipeline, and it doesn't really matter what kind of SIM kind of technology or data lake technology that you work with. This pipeline will be very similar, and we're using the Alex stack. It's open source. It's also used by a lot of vendors actually in the backend. But whether it's Splunk or Curator or Logarithm or whatever you like, the architecture is going to be very similar. They all have a logging agent to collect logs. They're all going to ship them off. We're going to talk about enriching those logs, for example. So how do we talk to APIs? How do we actually get some more data in those raw logs that actually mean something? We're going to talk about how we build detections, right? So. And this is the interesting part when we deal with the building detections. This is not going to be depending on whatever SIM you're used to work with. You can build generic detections so that you can then run on a Splunk or on an Alex stack or whatever. So this is pretty cool stuff. Even if you say, oh, we're using Splunk and this training is on Elastic, well, we don't focus too much on Elastic itself. The detections are the main focus, and then you can just convert them very quickly to whatever backend you have, so they keep their value. So that's day one, basically.
Sorry, Luke. And the thing I also wanted to know, mention is that at the end of the 2 days, if you follow the instructions, you can actually set this setup up on yourself. Okay. Yep. So this will be really great for after the training to do more. Studying more tests on threat hunting topics. Everything is built
in Docker containers, so you can just install it on your own Kali and just play around with it. It's just plug and play basically with Docker. It's pretty nice. That's the first day. We're doing that to make sure that everybody understands really where does the data come from, and if something doesn't work, that where to look, right? Because I'm not seeing logs, from a certain endpoint. That can be at different locations. Why that's a problem, right? It can be on the logging, on the agent itself. It can be on the endpoint. It can be somewhere in transit. It can be that your queries are wrong. So that you understand that pipeline very well, and that you have a good idea on, different kind of things that you do with logs before you start hunting, like enriching and how you go about building proper detections. Like everybody knows defense in depth. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about detection in depth, different ways of detecting things without actually, having indicators, right? Detecting the behaviors. So that's the first day, and then the second day. This is the red and the blue team stuff, right? So we're going to go through the skill chain and go through different phases. And as you can see here, we have I think it's about 7 labs. And the labs are built like it's from easy to hard, right? So we start with some very simple things like recon. We start building. We do the attack, so you have the red team aspect of explaining, what does this do and how does this work, and you can get to do that in your own environment. We then go on building how you would detect these things, and we'll have different ways of detecting the same things so that you have some overlap, but you don't miss certain things. Talk a little bit about alerting, and then also on testing. Like, so if you build detections, how do I test those very quickly when in a month from now? How do I make sure that that detection is actually still triggering without having to go through some very advanced manual stuff? So we go through that, and we go through recon, persistence, credential access, for example. Like everybody knows Mimikatz, but there's other ways of getting credentials. Talk a bit about curb roasting, right, where we explain curb roast and talk about service accounts and the risks there. Eventually going to lateral movement, and you see every time we will start with these MITRE techniques and go into the attack. So everybody gets to kind of do these attacks, understand how the attack works. I mean, we're really trying to bring together the offensive side with the defensive side, right? So if you're more into the red team kind of thing, so it's important that you understand how the detections actually can catch you, and vice versa, right? If you're on the blue team, if you're in a SOC, it's really important you understand the attack and how they work and what to look for. So if you have done the attacks yourself, you get a way better understanding on how the detections work, right? So we go really in depth on, how does this work and how do we move around. And then the last two labs it gets more and more complicated. This is actually where we actually start working with attack framework. So in this case, it's Metasploit, where we go and do some more advanced attacks. We start playing with shellcode or with injecting shellcode in memory, for example, and do some proof of concept attacks to explain the attack, and then go into how do you weaponize it. And the nice thing here is that when you go to the final lab, what you will see is then how you weaponize the stuff, like for example with a macro, and we start getting shells coming in, and you see all these kind of detections that we have manually built here. They will still trigger whether or not you're doing them manually, or you're using Empire, or you're using Metasploit or Cobalt Strike. And that's the whole idea, right? We don't care about the tool set they're using, we care about the techniques. So that's the second day. This is definitely what most people find the most fun part, because they get to really do those attacks. So let's go back to some of the slides. So that's a little bit of a preview of what the training is, and you probably saw there's a lot of this stuff is anytime you have to type something, we have like these little copy paste widgets, so you can make typos and so on. So
it's all running in Azure in your browser, so you don't need to set up any virtual machines. Really easy.
You don't need anything on your laptop. Nothing is needed. Doesn't matter what kind of laptop you have. We're using Guacamole, so it's all in the cloud. So why this training? And another important reason is we see more and more breaches, right? It's all over the place. And a lot of people are still like, oh, well, I have a next-gen firewall, or I have AV vendor A, B, or C. Well, it's not really going to help you. Your firewall is not going to be the solution to these kind of attacks, since most of the stuff happens on the endpoint. And AV, quite frankly, those days are counted. Detecting strings within applications it's not working. And yeah, AV does a little bit of heuristics, but at the end of the day, it's string matching. So if you start writing your own tools, AV will not detect those tools, right? If you use off-the-shelf stuff, yeah, AV has a signature for that. But anything that you build yourself, it's just going to fly past AV. So we're trying to kind of make sure people understand, that those things are yes, they're preventive and they stop off-the-shelf stuff. But if you start playing a little bit with most of the tools, you just sail past most of those protections. It's also helping people to make the right choices. Like, a lot of vendors do not explain how their technology works, right? If you ask an EDR vendor, so how do you detect privilege escalation? We detect Mimikatz. And it's like, yeah, and how do you do that? Yeah, that's secret, right? We cannot tell you that, because if you tell you that, the bad guys find out and then they'll bypass it, which of course is bullshit, right? But what we want to show you is like how do these detections work, and what are the questions you have to ask your vendor? Because there's Mimikatz, for example, which is everybody knows for getting credentials out of LSAS, out of memory. But Mimikatz has like 15 or 16 different modules. So what exactly for Mimikatz are you capable of detecting? Is it just scraping credentials, or can you also do the DC sync detections? Can you do event log disabling, which Mimikatz can do? Most people don't know, but do you do those, and how do you detect it? Is it a hash? Because then, every time you recompile Mimikatz, since it's open source, the hash changes. So it is kind of important to understand what technology fits where, how it works together with other things, and also how they what are the limitations. So we'll talk a lot about, this is how an EDR works, like what they under the hood are doing, and whatever EDR you use. Like if you use Palo Alto Cortex or CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Carbon Black, they're all doing that stuff under the hood. So you get a way better insight on where they are, what they're looking at, and how they're detecting the stuff they're doing. And we'll also talk a little bit about UEBA, so user and entity behavior analytics. What those bring to the table when you apply that on the data. So talk about the limitations and also where it really, really comes in and shines and helps you. Because when you listen to the marketing stories, like it seems like they're magical machine learning boxes that will fix your problem. Well, yeah, you still need to have the right data. You still have to integrate these things with other components, and we kind of focus on that. Otherwise, also, we see a lot of demand for MSSP services. So a lot of smaller companies, and also here in Belgium, for example, SMB market, right? And people have basically, they don't have resources, they don't have technical know-how, and they've said, I bake cookies. I don't want to run my own SOC. I outsource. But it's even if you outsource, it's important you understand how that SOC operates, because at some point, if they find something, they're going to come back to you. And you're going to have to do something, because if you get that alert and you have no clue what they're talking about, well, great, this MSSP did his job, and you're like, okay, thank you. So we kind of, help people understand how a SOC works, what you can expect, what is the response that you would take on that, and also like if you want to build your own SOC, like that's what we're doing in the first day, like that you understand like what are the components. How much work is that? Which vendors might you want to include in that? Or what types of vendors do you definitely need? And for us, it's also, it's not about just products and technology. This is very much about having people trained. This is the number one problem. Like when people talk about vendors and they know their firewall, they know their AV, but they don't know underlying how these things work. So making sure that people know when I say, oh, we're doing a curb roasting attack, and we got to domain admin like in 5 minutes, that do you understand what that attack means and how you can prevent that attack from happening? And your AV is not going to do anything against the curb roasting attack, and your firewall for sure is not. But that you know that, and that you kind of know, well, right, with the technology that we have now, there's nothing we can do about it. So how do you go about that? Really important. And this is the ultimate question that you're trying to answer. It's like, are we breached? Is something going on? And do we know it's going on? And where did it start? What's the timeline? What's the context that you can, that you actually, even if it's after the fact, that you have that evidence? Because if you have like a breach, and you have external companies come in, which you will always have, you'll have incident response coming in, you better have something for them, because those guys are really expensive. And if they have to start deploying, sensors and all kinds of stuff in your network after the breach, well, first of all, they're not going to have any valuable data from when this thing happened. So they're also guessing, and they're going to waste a lot of time getting your basic security hygiene in order. So even if you don't do any threat hunting proactively, but you just collect the right data and something happens, at least you have that to figure out, what went on. This is the number one problem in most breaches, is that we don't really know what they did. We don't know if they got to domain admin. We don't know if they created accounts. They still have access to our environment. And this is why in a lot of breaches, the attacker is back in 2 months later, and they encrypt all your stuff again, or they steal data again. So, and this is like just something from FireEye I really like. It's like a quote from the guys from SANS, the absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. It's not because, we don't see anything. that nothing is going on. It's because you're not looking, right? So, and a lot of this stuff, what you will see is that prevention, it will stop a big amount, like maybe 1/3 or half of all the bad stuff gets prevented. But then there's a big gap where, you see there's detections and missed events, but there's only like 9% of all the other stuff that actually gets alerted on. That's very little, right? So this is
reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me, because as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there's some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
Right. So I know it's early, but this is a very good question, right? Do you know what you're seeing, and do you know where your limitations are? It's that kind of question you have to ask yourself. Do we actually have any clue what's going on in that part of the network? Do we have visibility? And this is from 2019. I think there's about to come out a new one. This is from the M-Trends from FireEye. And what you see, and I there's a lot of talk about this dwell time, like how long are attackers in the environment. And you see, like 2011, it said an average of 400 and something days, and now 2019 is down to 56 days. That's average, right? But if you break up the numbers, what you see actually is that, well, we are improving, but this also has to do with the ransomware attacks, right? Because ransomware attacks are not stealthy, they're in your face. And we have improved on detecting stuff and deploying EDRs and NDRs and all this stuff. But definitely the fact that ransomware is so much more in your face has driven down these numbers. But what you see if you look at the numbers is that about like 40% of the companies is capable of reducing dwell time. So dwell time from the point that the attacker is in the environment till the detection is lower than a month. But then you start seeing there's 12% that takes over a year, sometimes 2 years actually. In this case, it's 2 years before they figure out something is going on. And then in the middle, there's still, there's a lot of work to be done here, right? Because even a month is long. The attackers don't need a month. Like when they get in, it's typically a week or two, and they should be good to go. So you have time, but you don't have months. So, and this is like I mentioned, in EMEA, we do see that the dwell times are going down. But again, you can attribute it to both increased visibility, but also into the types of attacks that we see. And question we get very often is, but we are not a target, we're a small company, we are not interesting. Well, there's almost half of the attacks is small business, because it's just easy to get in. And even if you think you don't have anything, well, you have money, right? They're after money. In most of the cases, cybercrime is just like, okay, you get your data back, or you get your decryption key if you pay us, right? And one of the trends there's a bunch of trends that we see with ransomware attacks, where let's say 5 years ago, it was a kind of scattershot. We get all these kind of emails that are being sent out randomly and hoping that people click on it and it encrypts their workstation. And that still exists. But we see much more targeted attacks, right? So there's three things we see. We still see phishing, obviously, where the user either gets his credentials phished and the adversary gets access to the VPN. We also, and this is something we have seen quite a lot in the last few years, exploits on VPN, SSL VPN devices, where the attacker has just to send some packets and gets remote code execution on that VPN device, and basically has access to your environment, and then can start going through all those phases of like recon, privilege escalation, lateral movement. And we also, this is something with the clouds. A lot of companies that are moving to the cloud, deploying remote desktop servers open to the internet. Stolen credentials, you open up your RDP to the world, and if somebody gets credentials, they're now in your cloud. Cloud very often being connected to your on-premise with Azure AD Connect or something like that. And also brute force attacks, right? If you put up an RDP server in the cloud, you get brute force attacks within minutes. And if you don't have really strong passwords or multi-factor authentication, in a matter of days, they will get through that. through that to that system. So these are the three things how we see they're getting in, and it's getting more targeted. Like it means people behind the keyboard. There's different kind of cybercrime verticals that are doing their thing. So you have people that focus on this initial access, right? They get initial access, they do some privilege escalation, and then they sell that off to another group of cybercrime that then uses that access, whether it's an RDP access or it's a VPN access. They use that then to go and deploy ransomware on servers. And they're not going to deploy it on workstations. They will go to the servers and shut down your AD, shut down your system management software, your IoT software, whatever it is, or and then you're completely stuck, right? Because if the server is shut down, your production is shut down, and then you have to pay. If it's a desktop, you re-image it, restore a backup, and you're done. And what we do see is this is manual, right? They will get in and they will deploy the ransomware. And if it gets picked up by antivirus, they will just change their ransomware a bit and try it again until it bypasses AV. And if you're probably not looking at every AV alert you get, so they'll manage after a few times to get it to run. It's not that hard to get past. If you know what AV is on the system, it's not going to be that hard to get past it, right? Or maybe I can disable AV, or there's so many ways to get around it. So, and you see, like, it's a business model, right? So here we see people that they can basically buy the ransomware online on the dark web. And they say, well, they split like the profits. Like if you get access over RDP, it's a 35-65%. If you get a different access, it's 25-75%. But this is an ecosystem, right? So we see a lot of this happening. Most of these things are not advanced. In the media, you see, very advanced attack. They're not advanced. They're using RDP. They're dropping port scanners. They're using Mimikatz. These things are not advanced if you are looking for the right things. So target audience here. Basically, we've done five or six trainings so far this year. We have a multitude of different kind of backgrounds, from system engineers, from people that work in SOC, that are analysts, people that do incident response. We also see people that have just been hired in the security industry. This training will give them a very good idea on the architecture of a network and how to collect these kind of data points and how these attacks work. We have consultants, basically anybody with a security background that really wants to understand how these attack works, how you could go about detecting them without having to count on a signature or whatever. We deliver it to partners and end users, and mainly EMEA for now, which is mainly a time zone issue, because we can't travel yet with COVID, right? But we would prefer, of course, to go and deliver this in some kind of exotic locations in classroom and have some fun, as we did, I think, a year and a half ago, when we went to Finland and then Sweden and Norway, and we did the workshops. So it's always a lot of fun. But we'll see how things evolve. Everybody here is slowly getting vaccinated, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to skip this. It's not that important. There is a landing page. So actually, I'll show you this. So if you want to get some more information on this, let me see if I have the right one. Yep. So if you go to ThreatHunting.be, you'll be redirected to a landing page from Exclusive here. There's a data sheet here. There's a recording of a webinar like this one, if you want to revisit that. And we will always announce the trainings here. So there's one now in May. We'll start announcing in the next few weeks some more trainings for July, I think, and then probably September. And you can register here. Basically, it explains also in a little bit more detail, like all the things that we're going to do in the training and so on. And you can go and register here. So that is just to give you an idea where to get more information. The data sheet is available there as well. So there's some feedback. We've had, like I said, we have had people from the NTT SOC that came here. We had companies like ISPs that came. We had some pre-sales people. We had people from banks. It's like all kinds. We had people from an energy sector in Sweden. So it's very different backgrounds, but it's kind of fun because it gives a very mixed environment. We keep the classes small, right? There's like 10, 12 people, so we can really focus, make sure everybody can follow, that we don't lose anybody on the way. So we have the next training 20 and 21st of May. There's about 4 or 5 seats at this point still available, so these kind of fill up pretty quickly. Like I mentioned, if you go here to threathunting.be, you can go and you can register if you're interested, and then somebody from your region from Exclusive will reach out to you for the pricing and so on. Yeah. So if there's any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat. There's some frequently asked questions that I put here. So don't send salespeople. I have no issue with salespeople, but you're not going to have a good time if you need to have a technical background. That means you need to know how to install a Windows machine and configure a Windows machine and have an idea on what an IP address is and stuff like that. So if you're a purely sales profile, I wouldn't recommend doing it. We do these typically once a month. Like we have 1 in May and now 2 in June, and probably then 1 or 2 more in the summer holidays. So we'll continue doing that. We also do exclusive trainings. So we've had quite a bunch of our partners that sent like 8 or 10 people over, and we just do a session. We pick a date that works for everybody, and then we have an exclusive session where there's only people from that company, which allows a little bit more open discussion sometimes about, we're seeing this in our environment, or we're using this, how do you see that? So that's always possible. Those are things that we discuss with the company. That's not on the dates that we announce. We just figure out what works. So and again, this is also, we're not really focusing on vendors here, right? There is no SentinelOne, Exabeam, Palo Alto, any of the products that we sell. That's not what this training is about. We're not trying to sell you those vendors. We're just trying to make you understand the techniques and the pipelines that these technologies have and the place they have in this kind of detections. So we will mention sometimes where certain things fit in, but that's going to be very, very light. So yeah, that is basically it for today. If there is any questions, I'm happy to answer. And I think I just missed my last slide where we can go about giving away a free seat. But I don't know if there's any questions. No.
There's right now no unanswered questions. So if someone has any thoughts or would like to know more, you can type it in. And maybe something worth mentioning is also that I think we have mainly partners on the session today. But if someone wants to join this session with your end customers, with the customers you serve, I'm sure that's a possibility as well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if someone kind of wants to sell this to their end customers, that's definitely possible as well. Yeah,
so if there's partners in the room, we actually have partners in Belgium that resell the training to their end users. Also, helping to kind of make the end user more mature when you're an MSSP and you have to deal with them, that they kind of understand how you work. Or also for end users where they have to make certain technology decisions. That they kind of have an idea, what do I buy first? Do I go get a sandbox? Should I do multi-factor? Do I get an EDR, NDR? So these kind of things you will understand after this training, like what kind of where it fits in. And yeah, this can also be a reselling opportunity. So we do have a program for that. I see here a question.
There is a question, yes. So that's about the maturity of the attendees. So maybe you can get back to the slide where we have the list of ideal or people who can join, and you can kind of recap that. What does this give to each of the different type of attendees?
You mean that's the slide deck I made? Yeah, hang on.
Junior analyst and there was like pre-sales, like, you know, the type of people who's been on the trainings. Because there's the question what that is about. It's a question that, you know, if my SOC is not that advanced, you know, it's not the SOC.
I see that. Yeah. So let me see. I'm gonna get something here. So yeah, threat hunting is out of reach if you don't have a SOC. You're not gonna do that. And if you have low maturity, yeah. But the question you have to ask yourself also is like, do I need to get to that point of threat hunting? Because there's quite a bunch of steps in the training where it will explain you like, how do I get visibility, right? This starts with visibility and knowing what's going on. And if you can build detections that trigger when something happens, well, that's already a lot more than not having anything. So, you start from having prevention, then you start saying, let's get visibility, let's build proper detections. And then, eventually maybe you get to do some proactive threat hunting, but it's not a must for everybody. So for us, that's the end goal. But even if you never go and do that, you're still going to get a lot of like, even if it's after the fact stuff, like if I have had some kind of incident that I have the right data to go and investigate and do my response. And even if you have low maturity in your company, like I mentioned, if you have to get an external company come in, they're going to need that data as well. They're going to have all these questions. And if you're prepared, that's going to make your life a lot easier. And it's going to also be a lot cheaper for you because they won't have to spend all that time. So, I see there's, on the pricing and so on, we will reach out to you. I don't like throwing prices in these webinars, but I'll leave it up to Tapio and I will reach out to you. This is some of the use cases here that we have for the training. So vendor and technology selection. Do you kind of understand the technology that you're buying, and do you know what questions to ask them? And do you know how these things integrate, like how they work together? And what are the limitations, right? Like this is something every vendor is telling you, yeah, we can do everything. Of course, like just buy everything from us and you're going to be fine. Well, not really, huh? Sorry, but and also like all this machine learning hype. Really explain like what does that do in this situation, and where does it help, and what can and can not do. So this is typically for our partners and integrators, and also for end users that are trying. They say, well, we're looking to increase our security maturity. Where do we kind of start, and so on. And then for pre-sales people, like for our partners, I think it's very important for pre-sales people that they get out of just knowing a specific vendor, and that they understand the broader kind of theory and problematic of these kind of attacks, right? Because if you only know the vendor and you only listen to that vendor story, you kind of pigeonholed in that. And it also allows us to, for pre-sales to kind of have the conversation with customers about managed services, because if you only sell products, you don't know what managed services, how that works, and the other way around. And we do see there's major traction for that. So I think pre-sales people do have to kind of get to understand a little bit how a SOC works and how that functions, and then where that data comes from, and so on. So completely different from selling a product, right? Existing SOC, we have people also that work on a SOC. Very often these people are very specialized, right? They do detection, or they do triage or whatever, or they do response, but they don't have the full picture. Like they've never done the attacks, right? They don't know the attacks. They just have alerts that trigger, and then they, have some kind of procedure to follow. So it's getting this kind of complete scope of like, where does the data come from? Who do I need to talk to if I want to detect something? Is that feasible? Can we get that data, or is it going to be too expensive, or too architecturally too difficult? And is there other ways of dealing with this? And also building really proper detection rules, right? That whether or not the attacker changes the tool set, those rules still work, right? And that you have different ways of detecting the same kind of attacks, because there is different ways of performing an attack. Like privilege escalation, there's quite a bunch of different privilege escalation techniques. So that's typically for people that already work in a SOC, for managed service providers. Also, we see a lot of people coming in and leaving, so a lot of junior people getting in, and this is a perfect opportunity to get people like that up to speed, like in 2 days. Like it's a minimal investment in time, right? If you're going to do some MSSP offering, this is going to be very valuable for you, that you understand, how you're going to build that infrastructure, how to build those detections and so on. Again, that is for either you already have an MSSP offering and you're looking also for tools to add to that, or to add to your detection strategy. And then same thing, like if you're an end user and you're outsourcing to an MSSP, this is the number one thing I see, right? I'm outsourcing, everything is not my problem now. Well, yeah, it is, because the response is going to come from you. There's very few MSSPs that are going to actually, when they detect something, are going to be able to respond and take action in your network, right? Most customers would be very, very nervous about, some guy, in a SOC from another company to go into the environment and shut something down or do something wrong. And, so you do need to understand, what that MSSP requires from you, what data, for example, that they're going to need. Are you mature enough to go and outsource? Because you can check it off and say, oh, it's managed. But if the MSSP is not getting the right data, they're not going to detect the right things. Right? So this is, I mentioned before, it's a very diverse background and people that we see, but all technical, right?
Yeah. So this was a very long answer to this question, but as you can see, it depends a little bit on where you are. You are going to get like different values out of the training, and if you don't have that much experience, this is the best place to start. And if you are a bit more ahead and a bit further on your journey, then you might learn more about like more details and the integrations and the bit more complete view. So I think it's a very good training for many different user groups.
All right, so I think we're a little bit over time, so thank you everybody for joining. I hope you found it interesting. And then let us know if you need more information, if you need pricing information or data sheets and so on. We're happy to help. Or if you want to have a call, we quite frequently have calls with people, with a team of people to kind of discuss and go through some of the stuff in the training, so that they have a good idea of what they're going to get before they come to the training. So yes,
we are going to do the drawing today. We will reach out to the winner. And we will also send some follow-up materials and also including pricing. And if someone thinks that okay, we are a little bit bigger organization, it might be good that you were able to present this to our team. We are happy to do it, like Luke said.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everybody. Have a nice day. Cheers.
Cheers.